Ladies and gentlemen, let me strip one illusion from your business today. If your numbers don't survive a double click, they're fashion, not function. Vanity measures are for the insecure, not the successful. You can plaster your dashboards with big figures, but if they don't drive profit, purpose, or progress, they're glitz, not grit. Let's tear down the mirage and rebuild with what matters. Business is full of illusions. Everywhere you look, someone is polishing numbers, decorating dashboards, and putting lipstick on failure to make it look like success. The illusion is seductive because it looks like progress. It sounds like momentum. It feels like growth, but here's the hard truth. Illusions don't pay salaries. Illusions don't sustain companies. Illusions don't build empires. Only substance does. And in business, substance is not optional. It is survival. Too many entrepreneurs and executives get drunk on their own vanity. They boast about the size of their mailing list, the number of followers on their Instagram account, or the downloads of an app that nobody uses twice. These are illusions. They create the impression that you are winning, while, in reality, your business is gasping for breath. And here's the tragedy. The longer you cling to those illusions, the more dangerous they become. Illusions delay the tough decisions. They make you comfortable in mediocrity. They seduce you into believing that style is more important than structure. Substance is harder. It requires brutal honesty. It demands that you ask yourself, are these numbers creating actual value? Are they moving the needle in profitability, in market share, in customer loyalty? Substance forces you to confront the truth that maybe your glossy presentation hides a business bleeding cash. Substance makes you admit that while you have 100,000 followers, only 3 of them are buying from you. That honesty stings, but it is the only path to growth. You see, illusions feed the ego. Substance builds the enterprise. Anyone can play the game of perceptions, but when payroll is due, when creditors are knocking, when investors are demanding returns, perceptions mean nothing. Cash flow does. Customers do, retention does. That is substance. And until you discipline yourself to prioritize substance over illusion, you will always confuse applause with achievement. The danger of illusions is that they are easy to create and even easier to celebrate. You can put together a glossy report with upward arrows, colorful graphs, and percentages that look impressive. You can stand on stage and announce that your user base has doubled, or that your reach has expanded across new regions. People will clap. They will congratulate you. They will be fooled, if only for a while, but the illusion always collapses, because when the spotlight fades and you're left alone with the balance sheet, only substance remains. Substance is not glamorous. It doesn't always make for exciting headlines. It is the slow, disciplined grind of converting leads into paying customers. It is the unglamorous work of reducing churn, renegotiating supplier contracts, and tightening operational efficiencies. It is staying awake at night to refine processes, not your PowerPoint slides. Substance is about the blood and sweat that nobody sees, but everybody benefits from when the business survives and thrives. Shattering illusions is uncomfortable, but it is necessary, because illusions create complacency. They allow you to believe that busy is the same as productive, that visible is the same as valuable, that loud is the same as effective. None of that is true. Activity without impact is noise. Visibility without conversion is vanity. Loudness without credibility is just distraction. You must be willing to strip away the comfort of illusions and face the brutal clarity of substance. And let me tell you this, substance will always outlast illusion. The world is full of entrepreneurs who were stars on social media, but disappeared when the market tested their business model. Because when the market decides, it doesn't care about your likes, your follows, or your vanity reports. The market only cares about value. The market rewards those who deliver something real, something useful, something enduring. That is why substance matters. You cannot fake substance. You cannot Instagram your way into sustainable profitability. You cannot Photoshop your way into market leadership. You cannot design your way out of a broken business model. At some point, the numbers must be real, the customers must be loyal, the revenue must be growing. The product must be solving real problems. That is substance. Everything else is theater. The sooner you shatter illusions, the faster you grow, because once the illusions are gone, you can finally focus on what matters. You can measure what counts, you can channel your energy into the right levers, you can stop pretending and start performing, and that is when real transformation happens. The choice is simple. You can live in the comfort of illusions, where everything looks good, but nothing works. Or you can live in the discomfort of substance, where the truth is harsh, but the rewards are real. Illusions will give you applause. Substance will give you legacy. Illusions will make you popular. Substance will make you powerful. Illusions will fade. Substance will last. So stop chasing smoke. Stop decorating failure. Stop polishing numbers that don't matter. Strip away the illusions. Demand substance. Because only substance builds businesses that stand the test of time. Only substance creates wealth that outlives you. Only substance turns dreams into reality. And in the end, when history writes your story, it won't remember the illusions you entertained. It will remember the substance you built. Numbers are seductive. They look precise. They sound convincing. And they can be manipulated to tell whatever story you want them to tell. You can stand in front of an audience and declare, "We grew by 200% this quarter," and everyone will clap. But the question is, 200% of what? Growth compared to what? Without context, those numbers are empty. Numbers without context are like a compass without a map, useless. Context is the difference between truth and illusion. A company that shouts about doubling sales might be hiding the fact that their costs tripled in the same period. A business that brags about acquiring 50,000 new users won't tell you that 49,000 of them never came back after the first week. The numbers on their own can make failure look like success, but context reveals the truth. And in business, truth is everything. The danger is that many leaders fall in love with numbers because they make them feel powerful. Numbers give you something tangible to present on slides, something sharp to announce at conferences. They impress investors, they excite employees, and they comfort the ego. But context is not always impressive. Context forces you to explain, to dig deeper, to confront the uncomfortable reality behind the numbers. And that is why so many avoid it. Take revenue, for example. A company says they made $1 million last month. That sounds like a success, but what if their expenses were $1, $2 million? What if they were giving massive discounts just to bring people in? What if that million came from one single client? And if that client leaves, the business collapses. Context transforms the story from celebration to caution. In business, context is not just about explaining numbers. It is about asking the right questions. What is driving these results? What do they mean for the future? How sustainable are they? Context is about understanding the story behind the numbers so that you don't just know where you are. You understand why you are there and where you might go next. The truth is, numbers without context create a dangerous illusion of certainty. They make leaders overconfident, investors reckless, and employees complacent. But when you force yourself to interrogate the numbers, when you insist on context, you strip away the illusion and see the reality. And reality, no matter how brutal, is always better than a comfortable lie. Context also protects you from manipulation. Numbers can be dressed up, inflated, or cherry-picked, but context asks, compared to what? Over what time frame? In which market? For which segment? A competitor might boast about explosive growth in market share, but when you look closer, you realize they slashed prices so low that they are bleeding cash. The context reveals not strength, but desperation. Every serious leader understands that context is the real data. Context is what turns numbers into insights, and insights into decisions. Without context, numbers are just noise. With context, they become a compass, and that compass guides you through the chaos of markets, the turbulence of industries, and the unpredictability of competition. Think of the difference between vanity and value. Vanity is saying we reached 1 million people. Value is saying we converted 5% of those people into paying customers, and they've stuck with us for 12 months. The first number looks good on a slide, but it's empty. The second one tells you about loyalty, sustainability, and future revenue. That's context. Leaders who ignore context end up making decisions based on illusions. They overinvest in marketing campaigns that bring in numbers but no real customers. They expand into markets that look good on paper but are impossible to operate in. They celebrate temporary spikes and miss long-term decline. Context is what prevents you from chasing shadows and forces you to chase substance. Context also requires humility, because to give numbers context is to admit that you don't have all the answers. It's to dig deeper, to ask uncomfortable questions, and to confront inconvenient truths. It forces you to slow down and analyze before you declare victory, and in a world addicted to speed, that humility is rare. But it is powerful. When you look at numbers, don't just celebrate, interrogate. Ask, what is the story here? What are these numbers not telling me? Where is the risk hiding? Who benefits from this version of the story? Context demands curiosity, and curiosity protects you from being fooled. At the end of the day, numbers will impress people in the moment, but context builds credibility for the long term. Because when the illusion fades and the spotlight moves, the only thing that remains is whether your numbers had depth, whether they were anchored in reality, whether they told the truth. The lesson is simple. Don't let numbers seduce you. Don't let percentages fool you. Don't be impressed by graphs that shoot upward without asking why. Numbers are not the truth. They are only indicators. The truth lives in the context. And when you lead, when you build, when you decide, you don't need numbers that look good. You need numbers that mean something. You need the context that tells you where you stand, what to fix, and where to go next. Because numbers without context can make you a celebrity in the short term. But context builds the kind of business that endures. So the next time someone presents you with a dazzling figure, pause. Ask the hard question. Demand the backstory. Refuse the illusion. Because context doesn't just beat numbers. It saves companies, it shapes strategy, and it defines greatness. The easiest thing to do in business is to tell people what they want to hear. The hardest thing to do is to tell them the truth, because the truth cuts. The truth disrupts comfort. The truth forces people to face themselves, and yet it is the truth that builds trust, the truth that earns respect, the truth that moves organizations forward. But truth alone is not enough. It must be delivered with presence, with confidence, with the kind of swagger that makes people stop, listen, and take action. There are people who know the truth, but they whisper it. They hide behind soft words, hoping not to offend. And then there are those who declare it with conviction, who stand firmly on their message, who refuse to dilute it for applause. That is the difference between being heard and being ignored. Truth without swagger is like a diamond hidden in the dark. It has value, but no impact. Swagger is what brings the truth to light. Swagger is not arrogance. Swagger is not noise. Swagger is clarity with conviction. It's the ability to tell a client that their strategy is flawed without flinching. It's the ability to tell your team that their effort is not enough, even if it makes them uncomfortable. It's the ability to walk into a room full of people desperate for validation and tell them, stop chasing vanity, start chasing value. That is swagger. It is not about being the loudest, it's about being undeniable. The world is already full of flattery. Customers are flattered by ads, employees are flattered by hollow praise, investors are flattered by inflated projections. None of that builds anything real. Flattery wins applause, but it loses respect. Truth wins respect, but only when delivered with the kind of force that cannot be ignored, and that's where swagger comes in. Swagger makes your words land with weight. Swagger makes the uncomfortable truth sound like the only option worth considering. Think about it. People are drawn to certainty. In uncertain markets, in uncertain economies, in uncertain times, they will always gravitate to the person who speaks with clarity and conviction. Even if they disagree at first, they cannot dismiss it. Because deep down, they recognize courage, they respect authenticity, they admire someone who stands on the truth without compromise. But speaking truth with swagger requires something deeper. It requires competence. Because if you don't know what you're talking about, swagger becomes arrogance. The only way to back up your swagger is to master your craft, to know your numbers, to understand your industry better than anyone else in the room. Then, when you speak the truth, it doesn't come across as opinion. It comes across as fact. That's the difference between noise and authority. People will resist the truth when it challenges their comfort. But if you deliver it with swagger, they can't shake it. They'll go home thinking about it. They'll replay your words in their minds. They'll hate it maybe, but they won't forget it. And in time, when reality proves you right, they'll remember who told them first. That is the long-term power of speaking truth with swagger. This is especially true in leadership. A leader who only tells people what they want to hear is not leading. He's babysitting. Leadership requires you to look someone in the eye and tell them when they're underperforming, even if it breaks their ego. Leadership requires you to stand in front of your board and admit when a strategy is failing, even if it bruises your pride. Leadership requires you to speak truth to power, even when it puts you at risk. But when you combine that honesty with swagger, people don't just hear your words, they follow them. And don't confuse swagger with aggression. Swagger is not about shouting. Swagger is not about belittling others. Swagger is calm, sharp, and unshakable. Swagger is knowing that your truth doesn't need validation because it is grounded in reality. Swagger is being so certain that even in silence, people feel your conviction. That's what makes it powerful. Business will always test whether you have the courage to tell the truth. There will be moments where a client wants you to dress up failure as progress. There will be times where investors want you to exaggerate numbers to make them feel secure. There will be situations where your team wants you to avoid the hard conversation. And in every one of those moments, you must decide, do you choose comfort or do you choose truth? Because comfort creates weakness. Truth creates strength. Speaking truth with swagger will not always make you popular. In fact, it might make you disliked in the short term. But popularity doesn't build businesses. Respect does. Popularity doesn't drive performance. Accountability does. Popularity doesn't make you unforgettable. Truth does. The very people who resist you today will one day quote you. They will one day say, "I didn't like it when I heard it, but I needed it." That is the reward of truth spoken with conviction. So here's the challenge. Stop whispering what people need to hear. Stop diluting the message. Stop polishing the truth to make it look attractive. Say it as it is. Say it with clarity. Say it with the confidence of someone who knows their craft and refuses to compromise. Because the world has enough echoes. It needs more voices. And those voices must speak the truth, not timidly, but with the kind of swagger that demands attention. At the end of the day, truth will always outlast flattery. Swagger will always outshine noise, and when you put them together, truth and swagger, you create words that don't just fill the air, they move people. They change companies, they build legacies. Growth doesn't happen in comfort. Progress never comes from being cozy. If you want to build something meaningful, if you want to change yourself, your business, your team, you must first learn the art of discomfort. Because comfort breeds complacency, and complacency is the silent killer of potential. The truth is simple. If people are too comfortable around you, you're not leading them. You're babysitting them, and babysitting doesn't build empires. Every great breakthrough in history was born out of discomfort. Every revolution, every innovation, every transformation came because someone was willing to challenge the status quo and make people uneasy. Comfort zones are prisons disguised as luxury. They keep you locked inside a false sense of security while the world passes you by. The leaders who matter, the entrepreneurs who rise, are the ones who know how to shake people out of that comfort, to wake them up from the dream they're living in. The danger of comfort is that it whispers you're fine. Comfort tells you that good enough is acceptable. Comfort makes you believe that the little you've achieved is the best you'll ever do, and that lie kills ambition. Because ambition lives in hunger, not in satisfaction. Ambition feeds on the gap between where you are and where you should be. That's why your role as a leader, as a builder, as a disruptor, is to make people uncomfortable enough to see that gap and to push them to bridge it. But let me be clear, making people uncomfortable is not about humiliation. It's not about tearing people down. It's about demanding more. It's about refusing to let people settle for mediocrity. It's about showing them the mirror they've been avoiding and saying, this is where you are, and this is not where you're supposed to stay. That is leadership. That is love in its most brutal form. Think of the athlete training for greatness. The coach doesn't clap when the athlete gets tired. The coach doesn't say, "Rest, you've done enough." The coach pushes harder, demands more, stretches the limits until pain becomes growth. Business is no different. If you lead a team and everyone feels comfortable all the time, it means you're not pushing them to their capacity. You're leaving potential on the table. You're keeping them asleep when they should be awake. People resist discomfort because it feels like an attack. But it isn't an attack, it's a gift. Discomfort is the alarm clock that wakes you up before you waste your life. Discomfort is the pressure that shapes coal into diamond. Discomfort is the test that reveals whether you're truly committed or just pretending. And here's the reality. Nobody wakes up to applause. People wake up when they are challenged, when they are stretched, when they are forced to face what they've been avoiding. Making people uncomfortable requires courage, because the moment you challenge them, they will resist you. They will call you harsh, arrogant, unreasonable. They will try to make you doubt yourself. But if you stay firm, if you keep demanding the best from them, one day they will thank you. They'll realize that the very discomfort they resisted was the turning point that changed their trajectory. The same principle applies to yourself. If you are too comfortable in your own success, you are already declining. The day you stop challenging yourself is the day you start losing relevance. You must wake yourself up every day with discomfort. Learn something new, enter a new market, take on a bigger competitor. Push into spaces where you are not the smartest person in the room. If your goals don't make you nervous, they are too small. If your vision doesn't make your stomach churn, it is too weak. Comfort is the enemy of greatness. Look at any business that failed after being successful. You'll see the same story. They became too comfortable. They believed they had arrived. They stopped innovating. They stopped questioning themselves. And while they were asleep in comfort, someone else who was hungry, restless, uncomfortable, came and took their place. History doesn't reward comfort. It rewards courage. Making people uncomfortable is about raising the standard. It's about setting expectations so high that they have no choice but to grow into them. When you walk into a room and demand more than people believe they can give, you ignite something inside them. You show them that they are capable of more than they imagined. That's why discomfort, though painful, is necessary. It's the birthplace of growth. So here's the challenge. Don't strive to be liked, strive to be respected. Don't try to keep people comfortable, try to make them better. Don't lower the standard to avoid conflict, raise it to create transformation. Because if people hate you today for making them uncomfortable, tomorrow they will thank you for waking them up. Comfort is temporary, growth is permanent, and the uncomfortable truth is this: if you don't make people uncomfortable, life will. Markets will, competition will, reality will, and by then, it might be too late. Better they feel the discomfort in your presence than the devastation of failure without you. At the end of the day, you must choose. Do you want to be remembered as someone who kept people cozy, or as someone who woke them up to their potential? Do you want to run a business that is comfortable today but irrelevant tomorrow, or one that is uncomfortable today but unstoppable tomorrow? The choice is yours, and if you're serious about building something that lasts, you already know the answer. Make them uncomfortable. Wake them up, because only the uncomfortable grow. Authority is not given, it is taken. You don't wait for the room to allow you to lead. You walk in, and through your presence, your conviction, and your clarity, you claim the authority. Because in business, in leadership, in life, people don't follow the one who speaks the longest. They follow the one who speaks with authority. Framing with authority means you set the terms of the conversation. You decide what matters. You dictate the agenda. Too many leaders walk into a room and immediately bend to the comfort of consensus. They dilute their message because they're afraid of offending. They soften their words because they want to be liked. And in that moment, they lose authority. Because authority is not about pleasing people. It's about commanding respect. When you frame with authority, you don't waste time on fluff. You don't fill the air with jargon. You go straight to the heart of the matter. You say, here is the problem. Here is what it means. Here is what must be done. And when you speak like that, people don't argue with you. They align with you. Authority has gravity. It pulls people into its orbit. But authority does not come from volume. It comes from clarity. The loudest voice in the room is rarely the most credible. Authority is calm, precise, and unshakable. It's when you can say something in 10 words that others take 10 minutes to explain. It's when your words land so sharply that silence follows. because everyone in the room knows the truth just showed up. Authority is also built on mastery. You cannot fake it. You cannot bluff your way into it. Authority comes from knowing your material so well, knowing your business so deeply, that when you speak, it is not opinion. It is law. People can disagree with you emotionally, but they cannot refute you factually. That is the power of mastery. And when you combine mastery with conviction, you create authority that cannot be questioned. But framing with authority is only half the equation, because words, no matter how sharp, must end with a demand. Authority without a challenge is just a speech. Authority with a challenge becomes a call to action. It becomes a catalyst for change. The challenge is what shifts people from listening to moving. Too many leaders frame well but fail to demand. They inspire but never instruct. They ignite but never direct. And so the energy in the room fades. The applause happens, but nothing changes. Real authority doesn't just impress, it imposes responsibility. It says, now that you know, you cannot unknow. Now that you see, you cannot unsee. So what will you do about it? That is the challenge. Ending with a challenge forces accountability. It removes the comfort of passive listening. It makes the audience participants in the truth you've delivered. It says, you have heard me, now prove me. And in that moment, authority becomes transformation. Because challenges are uncomfortable, but they are the birthplace of growth. Think about every moment that changed your life. It came as a challenge. Someone demanded more from you. Someone called out your mediocrity. Someone pushed you beyond what you thought was possible. And in that discomfort, you grew. That is why every message, every meeting, every moment of leadership must end with a challenge. Without it, you've only performed. With it, you've transformed. Framing with authority and ending with a challenge also protects you from irrelevance. In a world flooded with voices, people remember the ones who not only spoke with power, but also left them with a responsibility they couldn't shake off. Authority captures attention, but challenge creates legacy. Authority makes people listen in the moment, but challenge makes them act when you're no longer in the room. But let's be real, this is not easy. It takes courage to frame with authority because authority always threatens the insecure. It takes courage to end with a challenge because challenges make people uncomfortable. You will be resisted. You will be disliked. You will be criticized. But remember this, no one ever remembers the leader who made them comfortable. They remember the one who shook them, who challenged them, who forced them to become more than they were. So when you stand up to speak, when you sit down to lead, when you step into the arena of decision making, don't waste your breath on performance. Frame with authority. Make it clear. Make it sharp. Make it undeniable. And then end with a challenge. Push them. Provoke them. Force them to move, because the world does not change with words alone. It changes when words create action. At the end of the day, leadership is not about being liked. It is about being remembered. It is about leaving people different from how you found them. And the only way to do that is to speak with authority and demand accountability. Authority makes them listen. The challenge makes them act. And together, that combination is unstoppable. So the next time you open your mouth to speak, don't just fill the air. Frame the narrative. Own the room. Deliver the truth with the authority of someone who cannot be ignored. And then, before you leave, set the challenge. Leave them with a weight they cannot escape. Because that weight will turn into action. That action will turn into results. And those results will turn into the legacy you leave behind. Listen to me. Vanity metrics are illusions you pay for with true growth. Stop chasing fluff. Build metrics that matter. Tangible, trackable, transformative. Then you're not just measuring success. You're creating it. Now go out there, strip away the smoke. Measure the meaningful. And demand that your business proves its worth every single time.